check. Ready when you're ready.
Testing, testing, testing. Good evening, everyone. We'll be starting very soon. I just want to bring your attention that there is a booth right here as free literature, free books. There's also a booth in the back from Red River Post that has excellent literature as well. They have some of the same here. This book, titled Ministry Healing, is one of Barbara's favorite books. She quotes from it extensively, specifically in this printing. Um, you can find on page 56. That's come to the booth right over the white awnings on this side of the road. They have these books for free. You're welcome to take one. On page 56, it's the chapter that starts chapter 8, and it's titled The Physician and Educator. And this is where she often, you might hear her say, the only hope of better things is in the education of the people in right principles. So she got her initial inspiration in becoming the Barbara O'Neill that we know today came from this book. So we've offered it for free at that white table over there. There's two other books there. One is titled The Great Controversy. The Great Controversy is a book that goes through the history of the Protestant Reformation. It goes all back to the time of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, when Jesus weeps over Jerusalem in AD 31, and prophesies the destruction of Jerusalem because of the rejection of the Messiah himself. And it takes from there and it goes forward and it looks how, in the New Testament, Paul says the man of sin needed to be revealed. Now, many of you that have been here for Greg's presentations, he's talking about that very man of sin and showing the principles that are laid down in their own writings. But this book looks at the oppression that came upon the Christian world through the Dark Ages and then the light that began to dawn through reformers. Looked at Martin Luther, looks at John Calvin, looks at Wycliffe, looks at Tyndale, looks at Huss and Jerome. Some of these men were burned at the stake for their faith. And we stand on the shoulders of these men. This book goes through the history, Great Controversy, goes through the history of the Protestant Reformation and shows you what principles brought us the freedoms that we have today and where they came from, and the history of them trying to come forward and them being oppressed and down. And then it eventually comes into, and you'll see on the front of this cover, it has both the Vatican and the Capitol building. Now you notice what Greg's been talking about, and you'll see this laid down in the book. I recommend it to everybody. I've been teaching from it for quite some time. The youth in my school, and this is the third book. It's called The Desire of Ages. If you've ever looked for a book that could really break down the life of Christ, there is not a better book written on this planet than this book that just gives you a walk through the life of Christ, through the Gospels, gives a commentary and deeper insights into what was going on in the time and what was going on in the heart of our Savior. And so I don't know a better book than this. This is great for family worship. It's great for your own devotions. It's great for getting a deeper and fuller view of what Jesus came to this earth to do for us. So I couldn't recommend more free books. They are all for free at this white awning table, the white awnings, just to the left on this side of the room. After the lectures tonight, I encourage you to go over there and take a look at books and take them for free. Thank you so much. There you go, bud.
Hello, everyone. Now, I haven't seen up here before. My name is Michael O'Neill, and I happen to be a husband of a woman. You know what they say? A woman, there's a good man. Darling? Now, what am I doing up here? On this day, 28 years ago, Barbara and I were married. This is our wedding anniversary. Congratulations, Barbara, you've made a good choice. What?
I'd, I'd, I'd also like to mention that they had a vacation planned for this very week. And last year, we said, we just really want to have you back, and this was the only slot that the farm park had available. So these two made a sacrifice to be here tonight. So
Yeah. Vacations are overrated anyway, aren't they? I couldn't get much more fun than this. So, but we're very happy to be here. I don't often travel with Barbara, but I'm here this time, and I'm very pleased. She was telling me, "Oh, last year was and it was so nice, and I'd love you to come." So here we are. We've actually just come from Scotland prior to being here, and I just want to tell you, we stayed in Donald Trump's room in Turnberry. Oh yeah, bedroom. It's a room, lounge, it's a very palatial place, and we had the grand suite because the people there said we're going to give you the boss's suite. So I feel for Mr. Trump. They said you can turn up any time, and I had to keep feeling over, and I thought, oh, it's not having legs. I was just worried we might have been anyway. Don't let your mind go too far on that one. The Barbara and I have in the 28 years we've been married. uh, we found ourselves very compatible. We both love fruit as to love raising our children. So, so this match. Here we are, still here, still putting up with me, and we're very happy to be. Thank you, Barb. Happy anniversary, darling. She gets up here and talks and bosses you, all the things you probably like. She's actually my girl. But she's been cooking me meals. She told me this morning, she said, "This is what I love doing, husband." What do you love doing, darling? She said, "I love cooking your meals." Thank you very much. Okay, leave it with Barbara. Take it away, darling.
Even this is back here, you can see me in there, is that right? Okay, right. So I can see here. And I had 6 children and Mark had 2. When we married, our children were mine 10, he's 11, mine 12, he's 13, mine 16, mine 19, mine 21. And I'm not going to tell you what they are today because then I'll have to really think about it. But I think our youngest is 38 up there, and we have 25 grandchildren and 4 grandchildren. And we must have been married about a year, and Michael had been the business manager at the health care. I had gone up, was living there, and I was part-time supervisor of the health centre. Into my house, but I've been picking it up just like that. Now, I agree because I very much like Michael O'Neill, and we were married. And then after about a year, he said, I want to start my own health retreat. And he had an office down in the bottom. And so we took all our children down. Well, actually, the two elders, because one was off working and one was married. And I started to, because my daughter Jessie, my daughter Julia was 15. She was a very good cook, so we had a cook. Michaela, she was very good on the computer, even though she was only 12, so she was his secretary. And our three boys, who were, I think, 11, 13 and 14, were the gardeners. So we had a team. And the good thing about using it, help he's just and he walked out of the door and all. And it was a little bit scary. When I was to give lectures, Michael would come. As you've noticed, he's not at all shy. He would start talking. Come away. It's 8 years. And the reason I'm able to do what I do today is because I want to help people fight my shyness. And I felt the frustration of not wanting to give my child drugs, but not wanting to hurt them, but not knowing what to do. That frustration. And that is what drives me. That drives me to help others, because I think many people have been in that situation, and still today many people do not know what. And I've discovered that the remedies are so simple. And one of my first books was The Ministry of Healing. And we're just out the back madly trying to find out where are the 2 paragraphs that I've memorised. And we found them. It's in The Physician, the Educator. The reason why we find them, because this is a soft cover book and the page numbers were a little bit. It says the only hope for things is the education of people in the right fields. And that's why I do what I do. The physicians teach the people that restorative power lies not in drugs, but in nature. Body and the body alone is the. And we have found that type 2 diabetes, we've seen people recover. We've seen people with type 1 diabetes recover just by implementing simple lifestyle changes. So what I want to have a look at is what is diabetes, and it's very closely aligned. The principles are very similar with weight gain and, of course, the reverse weight loss. And I first of all want to have a look at the food we're eating. Never in the history of mankind have human beings eaten carbohydrates. And when you look at planet Earth, you will discover that every single nation, every culture has always had a form of carbohydrate. It's always been part of the daily food. But what surprises me is we've come to a time where it's almost all the carbohydrates are put together. And people are just overdoing the carbohydrates. So I want to do a carbohydrate assessment. So looking at the carbohydrates, I've got a black that isn't working very well. I know I've got a blue here. I wear them out pretty quickly. I said to Michael one day, here we go, after seeing a man's presentation that was really polished with PowerPoints, I said to Michael, do you think maybe I should go to PowerPoints? He said, no, stay with the whiteboard. And when we go places and someone's got a PowerPoint presentation and it's not working, Thank you. And we sit there for 10 minutes trying to get the PowerPoint going, and I sit there thinking, I'm just going to stay with my whiteboard. It never fails me. So what would many people eat for breakfast? Cereal. The reason why cereal is such a popular breakfast, pack it, pour it into a bowl, milk on it, goes like wet tissue paper, real quick and easy. And I think this is one of the reasons why this carbohydrate diet has become so popular. It's so quick, it's so easy. Because so many people are on technology too late, so then they sleep in, and then they've got to have something very quick, so they're out the door very quickly. I don't think anyone planned to eat this way. It just happened. Bread is another carbohydrate. And because cereal and bread don't take you very far unless you're eating simple needs, of course. That's almost like a meal and a slice. And because the cereal and bread don't usually take you very far, then mid-morning, the cakes, biscuits, cookies. I'll tell you a funny story, etc. In Australia, we call what you call cookies biscuits. And when we come to America and we see a sign that says biscuits and gravy, we think, oh, these Americans eat really strange. That's like a cookie with gravy on it. But I do get it. Your biscuit is almost like a bread roll, isn't it? So when I say cookies, cakes, etc., I'm talking about croissants, muffins, pretzels, pasties, pies. There's a huge amount there. If I keep writing them, it'll take up half the lecture and half the board. So we're just going to say cakes, etc. Another high carbohydrates come very popular is pizza. Also pasta. I didn't know what pizza and pasta was when I was a child, but I don't think there's a home without them now. Rice is another carbohydrate. Potatoes, another carbohydrate. And then the last, and certainly least nutritive value, is the pure crystallized acid that's been extracted from the sugarcane plant. Would you agree with me that many people today are high carbohydrate foods? It's just there, it's just fast, it's just quick, it's just easy. But when I lived in the rainforest, raising my children, this was not fast food. This is slow food. So down on the farm, this is the slow food. In fact, when we travelled, I used to make muesli or granola. It would take me all afternoon to make it. I'd rub the dates and oil into the oats and then put them on trays and dry them out. Oh, it's so easy when we're travelling. Put it into a bowl, put the milk on. It doesn't go like wet tissue paper, though, the one I make. It actually gives certainly more of a punch. Takes a while to make bread. You know, my husband, he loves apple pie. So I usually make him an apple pie every week, and that takes a little bit of time. Takes a little bit of time to make these. Takes a while to make pizza. Especially if you're making pasta from scratch, that's going to take a while. Takes a while to cook rice, to cook potatoes. I've never tried to extract sugar from sugarcane, but I'm sure that would take a while. So you see, down on the farm, this is all the slow food. What's fast food down on the farm? Fast food down on the farm is a banana, is an apple. In fact, I only fed my children 2 meals a day. I fed them a really substantial breakfast. I didn't hear from them for hours. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which was lunchtime, which worked really well for us, all the school was done by lunch. And I'm about to give you the Australian. Sorry, I didn't want to blast your ears and drums out. Have you heard of the cooey? You might have heard of the cooey. Well, that's the cooey. I'd cooey, and I'd hear. Because my children knew from a very young age, when Mum says cooey, you come. I was even in a supermarket one day, like a shopping mall, and I didn't know where the kids were, so I just cooeyed. They came. Now, sometimes my little bloke will, maybe 2.5 or 3, we're all sitting at the table, where's Willie? And we knew where to find him in the cucumber patch. He's getting a little hungry. The cooey hadn't happened, so he'd settle himself into the cucumber patch. Fast food. So fast food really is all your fruits and your vegetables. Everyone awake? That'll make for me what my cold dunk did for me. Whew. I've got some good news. Michael joined me this morning. Yes, we had a lovely, happy anniversary swim in the water. And if you think it's cold, it's warm compared to the sea in Scotland, where we were last week. Didn't stay in there long. All of these foods break down in the gastrointestinal tract to glucose. Tomorrow, I'm going to take you on a journey through the gastrointestinal tract, and I'm going to show you that incredible process that happens inside our gut to break down that food that was on the table with microscopic little substances, and then it gets absorbed out of the gut and into the blood. And then when it gets into the blood, and glucose, of course, is one of those substances, it goes on the M1 main highway straight to the liver, and then the liver determines where it goes. The first place it goes is to the cell. So, number one, the glucose is sent to the cell. How does it get into the cell? It gets into the cell under the action of insulin. Insulin is the key that unlocks the door to get the glucose into the cell. So let me introduce you to the pancreas. The pancreas lives under and to the back, basically, of your left rib. Under your right rib is your liver. And the pancreas, we'll see tomorrow, it plays a very important role in digestion. But we're not looking at that in this class. We're looking at the role it plays in the blood. It releases 2 hormones into the blood. One is insulin. And insulin's released upon demand. So if blood glucose levels are high, insulin release will be high. If blood glucose levels aren't too high, then not so much insulin is released. And insulin's role is to get the blood sugar level down. How does insulin get it down? It gets down by getting the glucose out of the blood and into the cell. But if blood glucose levels go too low, then there's another hormone called glucagon. And glucagon, it gets blood glucose levels up again. So these 2 hormones together to maintain blood glucose levels in the blood. Because glucose is the fuel used by every cell in the body. Now, what I'm drawing for you here, we have 100 trillion cells in the body, and 25 trillion run like this. The other 25 trillion are red blood cells. Leviticus 17:11, the Bible says the life of the flesh is in the blood. It says that because the blood carries the oxygen, the blood carries the nutrient, the blood carries the water to what I call the CBD of the human body. The central business district of the human body is the inside workings of the cell. The blood also takes away waste. The blood also contains white blood cells. No wonder the Bible calls the blood the life of the flesh. So the glucose goes in under the action of insulin. And when it gets in, it goes through a 20-step pathway. And this 20-step pathway delivers to us 2 units of energy. That's why we eat. To get glucose, to get into the cell, whether that's an eye cell, whether it's a brain cell, whether it's the cell in the muscles of the heart, whether it's liver cell. After the 20-step pathway, a chemical form of glucose is released out of that pathway. And that chemical form of glucose gets fed into the next section. This is the 8-step pathway. This 8-step pathway is called the powerhouse of the cell because the 8-step pathway delivers to us a whopping 36 units of energy. How come a 20-step pathway only gives 2 and an 8-step pathway gives 36? What makes the difference? Oxygen. Oxygen makes the difference. This pathway uses oxygen. This pathway uses no oxygen. It produces energy by the process of fermentation. How are you going to feel if every one of your 75 trillion cells has enough oxygen to get to the 8-step pathway? How are you going to feel? You're going to be jumping out of your skin with energy. But what we're looking at right now is the journey of glucose. Only so much glucose can be fed through those energy pathways. So now the liver causes excess to be stored as glycogen. Now listen carefully because these quick-release glucose stores called glycogen is very important for the diabetic. Glycogen is the name given to quick-release glucose stores. The glycogen in the muscle cell can only be used by the muscle cell. The glycogen in the muscle cell, it's like it's in a prison, can only be used by the muscle cell. But over here is the liver. And the liver can also store glycogen, but the glycogen in the liver, it can be sent anywhere in the body, all over the body. That's why there's no need to eat before you exercise in the morning, because you have glycogen stores. So yesterday I had breakfast like a king, I had lunch like a queen, and in the evening I had some of Paul's juices. So when I woke up in the morning, I did not need to eat, but I did need to drink water because water is vital for the release of my glycogen stores as Michael and I are running up hills doing some high intensity. My glycogen stores are being plucked. It's an amazing process. As my body moves, as these cells need energy, glycogen stores are plucked, sent through the pathway, plucked, sent through the pathway. No wonder Psalm 139 verse 14, the psalmist says, I will praise you, I'm fearfully, wonderfully made, marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. It's an amazing piece of organism is this body. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got glucose left over. Only so much can go through the energy cycles, only so much can be stored in the cell's glycogen. And so now the liver causes the excess to be stored in the most amazing fuel depot in the human body. It's called cells. And on this high carbohydrate diet, what's happening to Americans? What's happening to Australians? They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And some, to lose weight, have even gone on the fat-free diet, but it hasn't worked very well because fat doesn't make you fat. It's the high carbohydrate I first said. Every society has had some sort of carbohydrate as part of their meal. Now I've got some good news I want you to hear carefully here. Carbohydrate. Whew. What a relief with them. Husband 50 stop. I said, just, no. Carbohydrates aren't bad. It's only when they're overdone and refined, and that's what we see today. Overdone and refined. But we're actually seeing something else. Because in this little list here, there's something else that a lot of people don't realise. There is no doubt about it, refined sugar plays a huge role in diabetes. Nothing wrong with the sugar cane because the sugar cane is very high in fibre. You ever tried to eat? It takes about half an hour to eat 2 inches. And that's the peeled. The unpeeled, it'd take you all day to get in there. No, there's nothing wrong with the sugar cane. It's very high in fibre and it's very high in minerals. And what that does is slowly releases the glucose. But the pure crystallized acid that's been extracted out of the sugar cane, that's the problem. Because it gets the blood sugar level up very high, very fast. And that's when the brain says to the pancreas, quick, release insulin, we've got a problem. So too much insulin's released, now blood glucose level goes too low. So when it goes too low, then the brain says to the pancreas, oh no, we're too low, stop the insulin, release the glucagon. What does the person do when it's low? They'll get a candy, they'll get a Coke, they'll get a cup of coffee with 2 teaspoons of sugar. Will that get it up? Oh yes. But now it's too high. No, now we're too high. Stop the glucagon, release the insulin. Oh no, can you see this whiplash? And you know what this whiplash is doing? It's just wearing pancreases out. But something else happens before then. Insulin resistance is set up. It's almost as if the cell's saying, I'm sick of the sight of you. So it starts resisting the insulin. So the insulin can't get the glucose into the cell. And because the blood sugar level remains high, the brain says to the pancreas, more insulin, more insulin. But we don't need more insulin. We've got insulin resistant on the cell. And because the glucose remains high, then the glucose starts to spill out into the urine. And diabetes mellitus means sweet urine. And the first time it was discovered was in London when wealthy people were eating a lot of refined sugar. And where a man would urinate, they found that the rats were coming and licking up the urine. It was full of sugar. That's when they began to discover it. They didn't have it in the little villages with the poor people because they couldn't afford to eat the refined sugar. There's no doubt about it. Sugar started it. In his book Sugar Blues, William Daphne, he gives the history of it. You see it very clearly there. What does he call his book? Sugar Blues, because what does sugar cause? The blues. You see, our brain only has a 2-minute supply of glucose, and our brain consumes 15 times the glucose compared to any other cell. It can, its headquarters. But the blues is when the blood sugar level drops low. You see, it only takes 2 minutes. Once blood sugar levels drop, it only takes 2 minutes, and the brain isn't working. Not working very well at all. But something else is in here. Something else. What is the grain that the majority of cereals is made out of? What is the grain that the majority of breads are made out of? What is the grain that the cakes, the biscuits, the cookies, the muffins, the croissants, the etc., etc. In fact, we could put probably about 10 asterisks there. What's the grain? What's the grain that the pizza's made with, majority? What's the grain that the pasta is made of? It's wheat. So what's the problem with wheat? Didn't God make the wheat? He did. But the wheat we have today is not the wheat that God made. In his book Wheat Belly, Dr. William Davis, he gives the story of what happened to the wheat. It was in the 1950s. They wanted to create a plant with a high yield of grain to help with the starvation crisis in Africa, in Mexico, in India. So eventually they got a plant, and when I was a little girl, the wheat grew that high. How high does it grow today? It grows this high. And the reason it only grows that high is because it's got a very thick stem to be able to hold that heavy yield of grain. In fact, some plants 6 to 8 times more grain per plant. Dr. Norman Boulak got a Nobel Prize in 1976 for his hybridized wheat. It was rushed through with no safety studies. Sound familiar? Rushed through with no safety studies. They didn't think they had to do safety studies on wheat. And it's only now they're starting to see the problems that this hybridized wheat has caused. It was rushed through with no safety studies. It went worldwide by the end of the 70s. So by the 1990s, every cereal, every bread, every cake, biscuit, cookie, etc., every pizza, every pasta is made out of this hybridized wheat. So what happened? And by the way, the farmers love it. They're getting 6 to 8 times more grain per acre. That's 6 to 8 times more money per acre. They've got to pay their bills. But what's also happening with that wheat today, it's grown with superphosphate. It's grown in devitalised soils, grown with Roundup with glyphosate in it. And once they've processed it, it's sprayed with folic acid. It's not the staff of life anymore. You could just about call it the staff of death. But how does this affect diabetes? In the hybridization of the wheat, a starch structure was created called amylopectin A. And amylopectin A, the starch that was created in the hybridization of the wheat, it gets the blood glucose levels up higher than sugar. So here's amylopectin A, blood sugar level go very high with a corresponding dump. So let me give you something to compare it to. Amylopectin B is found in bananas and potatoes, and if you are familiar with the glycemic index of food, bananas and potatoes, they sit fairly high. In other words, they can get that blood sugar level up reasonably high, reasonably fast, not as high, not as fast, and so not as low. That's the amylopectin B. Amylopectin C is found in lentils, chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannellini beans, all your legumes. The amylopectin C gives a nice steady rise, nice steady maintenance, and a nice steady drop. What does every cell in our body want? A steady, sure consistency of fuel. People used to say to me, Barbara, how can you stand having your kids around you all day? Because I homeschooled them. I said, it's real easy when you don't give them sugar. It's really easy when you don't give them a high carbohydrate diet. And I didn't know back then what they'd done to the wheat. I'm up in the rainforest in the 80s, 90s. Because what you've got children that get a steady, consistent, sure delivery of fuel. So you haven't got these massive highs and massive lows. When blood glucose level goes high, it's like they're bouncing off the walls. When the blood sugar level drops, then they're cranky. You call it ornery, is that right? We don't have that word, but I think it describes it. We call it whingy. I said it one day and someone said that we don't know what whingy is. It was ornery, irritable. And that's why it was easy to raise my children there, because I didn't have these massive highs and lows. See, the 3 essential food groups. I've got a little bit of room down here. What are the 3 essential food groups? The 3 essential food groups are fibre. And fibre slowly releases the glucose. Protein. It's in the stomach that protein's broken down, as you will discover tomorrow. Fat. Fat is not the enemy, it's our friend. I remember one writer said it's going to take a whole generation for fat phobia to get out of the brain. Well, I think we're there. I meet an 80, 90-year-old, they won't touch fat. I meet a 60, 70-year-old, they're having a little bit. I'm meeting a 40, 50-year-old, they seem to handle it. I meet a 20, 30-year-old, there's no problem with fat. Fat does not cause heart disease. Dr. Malcolm Kendrick, in his book, The Great Cholesterol Con, he said, I'm still waiting for the proof. It never came because fat is an essential nutrient. The fattiest organ in the body is the brain, and that is the organ that suffers very much when there's not enough fat. When I read the Bible, I haven't read anywhere where there's Alzheimer's dementia. Have you? No, it's a fairly recent disease, the last 100 years. And you will find when you trace history, you'll find that the Industrial Revolution, what happened in the Industrial Revolution? They created high heat chemical equipment to be able to get oil out of hard seeds. And they're dangerous oils. In my next class, we're going to be looking at heart disease. And those dangerous oils, you'll know them. You go into the supermarket, they're the cheapest. They're in clear plastic bottles. They're the dangerous oils. And we were told, stop the butter, eat the margarine. Did that stop heart disease? Not at all. Cancer started to rise. So the Industrial Revolution, a lot of chemicals were introduced. People have been eating fat for centuries, depending where you lived on the planet. So these three essential food groups, they keep the food in the stomach longer, and they give a lovely, sure, consistent delivery of fuel. But on this high carbohydrate diet, releasing high glucose, and when you combine the sugar and the wheat together, there's a sugar and wheat there, sugar and wheat there, many sugars and wheats there, sugar and wheat there because they use yeast to rise the pizza and the bread, and they give sugar in it. Pasta's probably the only one that doesn't have the sugar in it. So you see a combination of all these. No wonder in Australia, I know the figures in Australia, 500 new diabetics are being diagnosed every week. And I think America's not much different. This explains the explosion of diabetes. No, sugar doesn't get let off the hook. It's still a big contributing factor, but the hybridized wheat, it's playing a huge role in the diabetes we're seeing. So let me show you where it sits on the glycemic index. What's the glycemic index? The glycemic index is a reading, an index or a reading on how quickly the glucose in that food is released into the blood. So let me give you some illustrations. So baseline for glycemic index would be about 55. Anything below 55 is considered low GI, so really good for diabetics. So all your berries, blackberries, blueberries, cherries, strawberries, they sit at about 26. That's why your berries are great fruits for diabetics, because they give a slower but sure release of glucose, whereas banana sits quite high. So what's the difference? With the naked eye, you can't see a difference, but under a microscope, in the banana, there's a very loose fibre structure, so it releases the glucose quickly, whereas in all the berries, there's a tighter fibre structure, so there's a slower release of glucose. Same with the potato and the sweet potato. Potato, high glycemic index, it's got a loose structure. It doesn't mean the diabetic can't eat a potato, but just don't eat a whole plate. Instead of having 2 potatoes, maybe have 1 small potato and have sweet potato. You see, the sweet potato's fibre structure is tighter, so there's a slower release of glucose. And the diabetic can get quite significant changes in their blood glucose levels just by going over to low GI foods. You can Google glycemic index and you can get a list of the low glycemic index foods. Grapefruit. Grapefruit sits at about 25, and that's not a surprise. Grapefruit is not a sweet fruit. Where does sugar sit? whether it be white, whether it be tan, or whether it be brown. It sits at 59, and that's not a surprise. What about white bread? White bread, white pasta. So we'll just say all the white wheats. They sit at 69. Why? Because of the amylopectin A. But what's a real shocker is whole wheat. So your whole wheat, it sits at 72. How could that be? Yes, whole wheat has more fibre. Yes, whole wheat has more B vitamins. But because it's not refined, it has more amylopectin A in it. Because it's not refined and it has more amylopectin A in it, it has more of an effect on blood glucose levels than even white bread. I had a guest who heard this and she started to cry. I said, "Why are you crying?" She said, "I'm 69. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 5 years ago." She said, "I do everything they tell me. I have whole grain bread, whole wheat pasta, whole wheat everything. And every 6 months I go to the doctor and he puts me on more insulin." And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. She said, "I'm so frustrated because the lady down the road, she has sodas, she has Dr. Peppers, she has cakes, cookies." She said, "I don't do that." She said, "I'm crying because it has frustrated me for years and you've just solved the puzzle. It's the wheat." So why don't the nutritionists tell the diabetic patients don't eat wheat? Well, a friend of mine, she went to do a nutrition course and she said, "Can I have the number of one of the students?" She rang up the student. She said, "You got your textbook there?" She said, "Yes." "Can you go to the back of the textbook and tell me who funded the studies quoted in the textbook?" "Oh, the wheat industry. Oh, the sugar industry." I'm very thankful to writers like Dr. William Davis, who's told the true story on wheat. And how much wheat does Australia grow? How much wheat does America grow? Can you see how there's a monetary aspect here? But we haven't got time to talk about that. So I want to take you through quickly the Sustain Me principles and show how they help to conquer diabetes and help to lose weight. So that was supposed to say sunshine. I'm trying to master the art of saying one thing and writing another. This has to go. Sunshine. How does sunshine help diabetes? In every cell that makes up the pancreas, there's a DNA in the very core. And that DNA has 2,500 receptor sites for vitamin D. Michael and I got some very nice vitamin D this morning. It's very nice in the sun at the moment. It's hard to sit in the sun in Dubai. It's hard to sit in the sun in Thailand because it's so hot, but there's a lovely coolness in the air that allows us to go in the sun. Ian Wishart, he's written several books on vitamin D, and he shows in his book that sunscreens are causing basal cell carcinomas. Because our skin cells need vitamin D. And when you wear sunscreens, you're not getting any vitamin D because you're blocking the UVB rays that the skin needs to create vitamin D. You can overdo the sun, but many today are underdoing the sun. Use of water. One of the best ways to maintain blood glucose levels between meals is water. Especially if you take that little crystal of either Celtic or Baja salt before each glass of water. For our pancreas to make insulin, we need to be well hydrated. For our pancreas to make glucagon, we need to be well hydrated. What's well hydrated? 8 glasses of water a day. 8-ounce glasses. Start early. Have your water next to your bed. I find that the easiest way. Start early. Start early. And that helps to maintain blood glucose levels between meals. Sleep. For that pancreas to heal, for that pancreas to revive, for that pancreas to be regenerated, and it can be, we need to be having 8 hours sleep a night. If you're not sleeping 8 hours, I've got some good news. You can train your body back into 8 hours. In my book, Sustain Me, I have a whole chapter on sleep where I explain in there how you can do that, especially the hours before midnight. So I believe that you've gone out of summertime, you're into wintertime now, and it's between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. that melatonin is released in largest amounts. And melatonin is the hormone, it's called the fix and rejuvenate nighttime hormone. Melatonin is the one that's responsible for increasing healing in those hours. So for your pancreas to start to be revived and recharged, we need to grab those hours before midnight especially. Trust in God, thank God every day. It's a principle that's outlined in the Bible. It's found in 1 Thessalonians 5:18. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. When you thank God for who you are, when you thank God for where you are, when you thank God right now, today, for what you have, it increases healing. The research is showing the effect of the mind on the body, the mind on the different organs. Thank God every day for your pancreas, even if you have diabetes. Thank Him, because thanking Him unties His hands and increases healing to that area. Abstain. There are some things that must stop if you want that pancreas to heal. And you're not surprised, I'm sure, to hear me say, number one is sugar. If your pancreas is not happy, if you have diabetes, even maple syrup and honey aren't going to go well. They get the blood sugar level up too high. There is one sweetener that does not have that effect, and that's stevia. It's a plant sweetener. I've had a few people say, oh, I can't use stevia, it has a bitter aftertaste. I go, aha, you've used too much. It's hard to believe that a 1/16 of a teaspoon of stevia equals 2 teaspoons of sugar. So most people, they just put too much in. Put a little less in, taste it. Put a little tiny bit more in. But stevia is the only sweetener that doesn't affect blood glucose levels. Wheat must stop if you want to conquer diabetes. And if you want to get that weight down, the wheat must stop. Notice Dr. William Davis's title to his book. It's called Wheat Belly, because he shows that wheat gets the blood sugar level up so high, so fast, that the body quickly converts it to a visceral fat, which settles on the belly. In fact, in his book, I think he uses the term wheat belly every single page. What also must stop is caffeine. So what's caffeine got to do with diabetes? When we take a cup of coffee, it has an effect on the body like a crisis. And that's why so many people say, oh, I love my coffee, it just gets me going. I said, yeah, I guess you're going because there's a tiger on the path. You've got to run for your life. It's a crisis. And whenever there's a crisis, what the body does, it releases more insulin. It releases more insulin to get more glucose into the cell, because you're about to do the run or the climb or the fight of your life. It's a crisis. But if you are a coffee drinker, don't stop now or you won't be able to come to class tomorrow. ease off it very slowly. Little by little, ease off it very slowly. Then you won't go through the suffering. Alcohol is not a surprise with alcohol because it's a very high sugar product. You've got to get the chemicals out of the home, out of your clothes, out of your food. They can contribute to the damage in the pancreas. There are some things that must stop if you want the pancreas to heal. Inhale through the nose, because when we inhale through the nose, our cells will get more oxygen. And this cell that I just drew for you, those cells are in your pancreas. So if every pancreatic cell is getting enough oxygen to get down to 36 units of energy production, your pancreas is going to start working better. Nutrition. We touched on nutrition when we talked about the 3 essentials. Fibre. All plant foods have fibre, and fibre slowly releases the glucose. Protein. As a plant-based lady, I don't call myself a vegan. You know why? Because I was in Wales a few years ago at a conference that had all plants, and there was carrot cake. And I'm partial to dessert, healthy dessert, of course. They had carrot cake, and on top there was this white fluff. I said, "What's that?" They said, "It's vegan. It's vegan." I said, "I know cow's cream. I know coconut cream, but what's that?" And then they brought this spray can. That's enough to turn me off. But I looked at the ingredients, cheap seed oils, chemicals, sugars. I said, "I'll just have the carrot cake, thank you." And since that day, I do not call myself vegan because I discovered that cheap seed oils are vegan, refined sugars are vegan, chemicals are vegan. What do I call myself? I eat plants. That's what I eat. I eat plants. I eat unrefined plants. Fat. You know, you'd just about be better having whipped cow's cream on that carrot cake compared to that white vegan fluff. And when someone is a dairy farmer and someone else will come along and say, you should be eating vegan, and they've got that white fluff on their cake, what do you think that dairy farmer thinks? He knows that his organic cream is far superior to that white supposed vegan cream. Is that right? What do I put on my carrot cake? Oh, I make cashew cream. You can make some beautiful creams out of nuts. And coconut cream, that's a very nice one to put on. What I love about God's way of eating is when some things have to stop, there are some beautiful alternatives. You can go to officialbarbarao'Neill.com, that's my true website, and you can download the Misty Mountain Cookbook, and there's some beautiful recipes in there. Food should taste good. How often does it taste good but it's killing you? Or how often is it really good for you but it tastes so bad? Food should taste very good. In my next class, when we look at the heart, you will see that many people have been turned away from fat and turned away from salt, and it's a total misconception because salt and oil make food taste good. So also with nutrition, my advice is go to the low glycemic foods, and it's not hard to find a chart on that. Moderation. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it says, "There is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven." Also I've got to get this one right, I'm just memorising this. I think it's Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 17. It says, "Blessed is the land when the king is the son of nobles, and the princes eat in due season, for strength and not for drunkenness." So what's due season? Do you know the old saying, we should eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and tea like a pauper? Or you say supper like a pauper? But what have diabetics been told for the last 40, 50 years? How often are they supposed to eat? Every 2 hours, yeah? Well, they've changed their minds, have you noticed? Notice they don't say, sorry, we made a mistake. No, they never say that. New research reveals. What's the new research reveals? Time-restricted eating. What's time-restricted eating? Eating twice in a 24-hour period. What does that sound like? Breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and supper like a pauper? Is that new? That's been around for hundreds of years. No, this isn't new research. The fact is they made a mistake, because when you eat every 2 hours, as you'll see tomorrow, when we go on our journey through the gastrointestinal tract, it impacts digestion greatly. I remember my husband said to me one day, he said, I had a 3-hour job to do today. It's 8 hours later and it's still not done. Why? Because someone rang up, someone knocked on his door. He keeps getting interrupted. That's what happens with stomach. If you eat every 2 hours and your stomach contents are tested at the end of the day, there will be remnants of breakfast still in the stomach because you keep interrupting. Do you know what they're finding now? Eating twice, 6 hours apart, in a 24-hour period, diabetics are managing their blood sugar levels better than when they ate every 2 hours. People are losing weight. Brains are working well, because when the stomach's overrun and overworked, the brain suffers. No, it's not new research, it's actually old sayings that have been revived and discovered. No, this works best. Between meals, when you get that hunger pang, it's usually thirst, because the body doesn't know the difference between hunger and thirst. I remember my son Peter came to me one day, he's 15. He said, Mum, the water's not doing it anymore. And I looked at my watch and I said, great, it's lunchtime. And that's what you will find. When the water's not doing it anymore, it's usually time to eat. And what you will find also tomorrow is that the absorption of our nutrients predominantly happens in our small intestine. Do you know what that means? When the stomach is empty, our cells are still getting nutrients from our small intestine. So when that stomach's empty, you don't gotta eat. You drink. You drink water. So it's moderation in the times that you eat. That's in due season. Blessed are the princes that eat in due season. Meaning there's a time to eat and there's a time not to eat. Give the stomach a rest, as you'll see tomorrow. Exercise plays a dramatic role in diabetes, because when we exercise, it causes a release of the stored fuel. And we have the most amazing stored fuel. We have the glycogen in our cells, and when that runs out, guess what we've got? We've got more in our fat cells. We've got a great backup system there. I call the glycogen stores the kitchen cupboards. I call the fat stores the basement stores. And this explains why Dan, who came to our program, he was 19, he had type 1 diabetes, he'd had it since he was 15. He had a double course of antibiotics for a bad chest cold, and it killed the beta cells in his pancreas. The doctor told him that. So he'd been on 90 units of insulin a day for about the last 3 years. So he came to our retreat. And the first 2 days are juicing days. And his blood glucose levels are starting to balance out to the point where he was getting blood glucose lows. Why? Because he was still on too much insulin. All that insulin allowed him to do was eat this. And when he stopped that, guess what? He didn't need so much insulin. He said to me, my doctor said my pancreas is dead. I said, what's dead? Is it gangrene? If there's blood going through that pancreas, there's life going through the pancreas. First 2 days, if he got a blood sugar level low in the middle of the night, he'd take a candy. That always gave him a headache. Blood glucose levels went up too high, too fast. After a couple of days, he felt a bit guilty. He was at the health retreat and he was having a candy in the night. So he decided to eat an apple. But it takes a long time to eat an apple in the middle of the night. That apple juice got his blood sugar level up and he didn't get the headache. By the end of the week, after hearing this lecture, he tried something else. If he had a blood sugar level low in the middle of the night, he'd jump on the floor and do 30 push-ups. Blood sugar level would come up. Where'd that come from? Glycogen stores. As he's doing the push-ups, it's feeding his cells, but he's also getting release from the liver. He told me that he woke up one morning, and I have to give you the Australian standard, that's the one I know. Blood glucose levels should sit at about between 5 and 6, 6.5. He got up one morning, his blood glucose levels were 3. That's almost passing out. So he had some salt and some water, got dressed, had another salt and another water, went for a run up and down the hills. Easy at Misty, you run up the hills, walk down the hills. That's the high intensity recover, high intensity recover. I'll show you that in more detail when our next lecture, when we look at the heart. He got back, tested his blood glucose levels, 9. And he'd had nothing to eat. They went from 3 to 9. Where'd that come from? His stores. And if he was starting to run out of the liver stores, which can go anywhere, the body will start to break up the fat stores. What an amazing process. But the body would not have done that if he hadn't drank the water. And the body wouldn't have done it if he hadn't done the exercise. His cells started moving and demanded some fuel. So it went to the backup stores. What an amazing body. Within 3 weeks, he was on 10 units of insulin a day from 90. Was his pancreas dead? No. I never say never. Let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. Type 1 diabetic. Type 2, they're easy. Type 1, what are they told? Your beta cells are dead. They're not making it anymore. Well, maybe, maybe not. Let's try. Let's try. Everyone I know is managing something, and if you can manage, you're doing well. One day Jesus will come again and we'll all be totally cured. But until then, we manage. But I thank God that we can manage. Let's have a break and we'll meet again at 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Hello, testing. One real quick note before you all break. Tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, we're going to be shutting down all the commerce. So if you and we're going to keep it shut down from 7 tomorrow evening until 7 Saturday evening in honor of the Sabbath. So if you want to get food tomorrow, if you want to get food after 7 tomorrow, or if you're coming on Saturday and you want food on Saturday, both of the food trucks here, both the Lemonade Place and the locals, have offered to have you prepay for it so that you can have the food. They'll still provide the food on Saturday. So just need to go over there tonight, either in the intermission here or afterwards. There's a QR code on the locals, and the Lemonade has a ticket that you can buy to be able to get the food then. Thank you.
Check 1 2 1 2. Testing 1 2. Check 1 2. Test 1 2. Yo. You want to say something?
I just want to call people in.
Yeah, go ahead, speak.
Not for me. It won't work with my voice.
Yeah, this is AI, so it makes you sound like you're singing.
That's how you do this.
That's it. I'm just a good programmer.
He's not an artist at all. He's a computer nerd.
Find out.
Hello. We're going to get started now. Matt and Josie are going to bless us with another 1 or 2 minutes. One? Just one?
That's what we were prepared for.
Okay. They're going to bless us with another musical piece. And Barbara's going to come up immediately after they're finished. So please come sit back down in the auditorium. And I'm not going to be back up here, so there won't be another announcement after this. So please come sit down and welcome Matt and Josie. Thank you, guys.
Good evening. Do you guys enjoy looking at the stars at night? They're beautiful, aren't they? I remember as a child, my dad loved the stars, and he would take us out and show us things in the heavens. And I remember being just awed at how vast they are and how small we are. And I remember thinking how what's the word? Insignificant we are. And feeling really overwhelmed with that, because when you look at the heavens, there's a sense of how big God is. And sometimes he seems very far away, to be honest. But there's these 2 beautiful verses that you can find in Scripture. One of them is from Psalm 8, and there's this question that King David asked, and he says, "When I look at the heavens, the work of your fingers, what is man that you are mindful of him?" Do you ever feel just insignificant and like, how could we ever be of any value to someone so vast? But then there's this beautiful verse that I just love from Isaiah 49, and it says, "Can a woman forget her nursing child, that she should have no compassion on the son of her womb? Even these may forget, but I will not forget you. Behold, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands."
As I gaze upon the heavens, all the wonders of you, dust in this vast expanse. We are here, but for a minute, take a breath, and then we're gone. Yet you set your love upon us. You've engraved us on your palms. Oh, you set your love upon us. You've engraved us on your palms.
one quick announcement. I know I said I wasn't going to come back up here. One quick announcement. We ran out of some of the books, but they went and got some more. And so after this lecture, if you were trying to get a book over here and they were out of it, they went and got more of them in storage and brought them over. So there will be some more. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I just had to go down there to listen to that beautiful music. I'll just get my pens. So in this class, we're looking at the heart, and everyone that has a heart should be here. You see, this is the #1 killer in the world today. Thank you. The #1 killer in the world today is cardiovascular disease, or you could say heart attack or stroke. So what is medicine doing about this #1 killer? Let's have a look at some of the things that medicine is doing, and we're going to see if it's having an effect. I just realised that I haven't got my earpiece on. That will help. Sometimes you get big ears and sometimes you get little ears like mine. So you've got to make it fit. Okay. So what's medicine doing to try and reduce this #1 killer? Number one, in the 80s, they decided to get everyone on a fat-free diet or a low-fat diet, and get people to stop eating butter and start eating margarine. Has that helped? Not at all. And I think here in 2025, most people are realising that one didn't work. And when we threw away the fat, we threw away a lot of flavour in the food. No, the fat-free is not working. So what else have they done? Everyone over the age of 50 is supposed to be on aspirin as a blood thinner. Has that worked? No. Here are the side effects of aspirin. It causes stomach bleeds, causes eye bleeds, causes brain bleeds. No, that one's not working. Everyone that has a heart attack has to go on the statin drugs. What are statin drugs? Statin drugs are cholesterol-lowering medication. Has that worked? No. No, that hasn't worked at all. In fact, the Framingham Heart Study was set up to prove that fat causes heart disease, but it never did. In fact, what the Framingham Heart Study has shown is that people with high cholesterol levels don't get Alzheimer's. Whew. And what Dr. Malcolm Kendrick has shown in his book, The Great Cholesterol Con, is that cholesterol does not cause heart disease. There's another book called The Great Cholesterol Deception by Dr. Peter Dingle. He also showing the same thing. The Great Cholesterol Lie by Dr. Dwight Lundell. He also shows that no, cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. Another one is The Great Cholesterol Myth by Johnny Bowden. Another one, The Great Cholesterol Hoax. We're running out of names. So what causes heart disease? Because it's the #1 killer in the world, if it's not cholesterol. So why do they say it's cholesterol? I will show you that, but there's another thing that they have implemented, and that is they've lowered the levels. What do I mean by lowered levels? Well, now, in America, I think what they're saying is that you should never go above 190. Would that be right? You should never go above 190. But it was about 10 years ago when I was running a retreat in Alabama, there was a nutritionist there. She was 69. So she'd be 79 now. And at 69, she was still working. She said, I work with a doctor part-time and I have my own practice part-time. She said, I have the advantage of being schooled in university 40 years ago. And she said 40 years ago, it was perfectly normal to have a cholesterol level of 300. Did everyone get that? 300. So lowering the levels, making the baseline 190, has that reduced heart disease? Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. And when I was in Maryland, I think it was over a year ago now, I was talking to a lady who was in her 70s. She said, I'm a pathologist. I used to do all the gauging for the blood tests that come in for cholesterol. And she said, we considered a cholesterol level 320 perfectly fine. And if a person will go down to 150, the brain's not going to work very well because the brain is the fattiest organ in the body and cholesterol is a very important lipid. Dr. Malcolm Kendrick, in his book, The Great Cholesterol Con, he said for the first time, normal levels of a normal vital body substance is being called a disease. So what causes heart disease? Well, I'm reading another of Dr. Malcolm Kendrick's books. He's a GP, but he is specialised in cardiovascular. It's called The Clot Thickens. When you cut your hand and it starts to bleed, what happens? It starts to clot. Is that right? Well, that's exactly what happens in your artery. When something damages the wall of your artery, it starts to clot. And what causes the clot? The clot can be made up of platelets sticking together and blood cells. I need to get my red for this next illustration because I want to show you what happens in your blood vessels. So here's a blood vessel. And the blood vessel, the cells that line the blood vessel, here are the little cells, they're called endothelium cells. And these endothelium cells, they're quite delicate. And so God, in his wisdom and mercy, he put a little lining of fine hairs. And those fine hairs are called the glycocalyx. And that glycocalyx helps to protect those endothelium cells. Because if those endothelium cells get damaged, then the clotting happens. But the glycocalyx is vital because it helps protect. And the glycocalyx also releases nitric oxide. And nitric oxide, it has an effect on the body as a vasodilator. What's a vasodilator? Opens the blood vessels of your vascular system, and your vascular system, of course, is your blood system. And those little hairs called glycocalyx, they not only play a protective role, they also cause a release of nitric oxide, which opens those blood vessels. But what's happening today? You see, they were intrigued as to why diabetics' risk of heart disease is far higher than the non-diabetic. And as we looked in our last class, a lot of people today are on this high carbohydrate, high sugar diet. And when there's high glucose in the blood, Dr. Malcolm Kendrick shows that it actually can destroy some of those glycocalyx. Now, that's not so much a problem. Of course, it is a problem because now that protection's gone, it's a lot easier to damage the arterial walls. And in a minute, I'll show you what damages them. But where the real problem arises is when we come down to the finest little capillaries. The little capillaries are all in our extremities, so in our feet, in our hands. And some of those capillaries are smaller than a strand of hair. Now, if I held up one strand of my hair, you wouldn't even see it. That's how tiny they are. and they are lined with glycocalyx. And in this high sugar, with the high glucose in the blood, when you're getting down to the finest little capillaries, which will be finer than what I've drawn there, the glycocalyx is getting destroyed, and what happens is those little capillaries rupture. And what is important, this nitric oxide, it's a vasodilator, dilating the blood vessels all the way down into our feet, but when they're rupturing, that puts pressure on the main arteries and the blood pressure goes up. The blood pressure goes up because what the body ideally should be having is the blood dispersing through the extremities, coming back in our vascular system. But when you've got the rupture of these tiny little blood vessels happening, you haven't got that dispersion of blood, so blood pressure rises. And that explains why the diabetic has a far higher risk of high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease, stroking, because this glycocalyx is getting destroyed and rupturing in those fine capillaries. But here, in the major artery, you have still got some damage with your glycocalyx, and that makes the endothelium cells even more susceptible. So I just told you the name of a whole lot of books I've got in my library. And in my book, Love Your Heart with All Your Heart, which is the title of my chapter in my book, Sustain Me, I also quote another book by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. You see, we're running out of words, so you know what she had to call her book? Put Your Heart in Your Mouth, showing that what's coming into our mouth is actually affecting our blood vessels. Because it's actually not a heart attack, it's a blood vessel attack. If it's a stroke, it's damage or a blockage in the carotid arteries. But if it's a heart attack, it's up in the heart muscle. And it does not happen in the venous system. You see, away from the heart is your arterial system. Back to the heart, after the little capillaries coming up, it's the venous system. You don't get it in the venous system. It only happens in the arterial system. Why is that? What's happening, and that's what Natasha Campbell McBride shows. The first 3 chapters of her book, she lists all the environmental poisons that are damaging the arterial wall. We've talked about some of them. We've talked about the polyester, nylon and acrylic, the clothes. We've talked about the chemicals in the washing detergent. So, you know, we often stay in Airbnbs. Whoa, you should see what's under the kitchen cupboards. You should see what's in the bathroom cupboards. Whoa, I shut it straight away. And when I came into the house where I was staying, it's a very nice house, but the smell, it had those chemical air fresheners. Well, I got rid of them real quickly. Back under the sink with all the rest of the chemicals, and then I always travel with my essential oils. But what I had to do to get the smell out, I got a washer and wrung it out tightly and sprinkled pine oils, eucalyptus oils, and I'm wiping all around it, just to get a better scent in the place. Those chemical air fresheners, you breathe them in. Anything you breathe, whether it be mold or whether it be chemicals, which are both toxic. I can't tell you one's more toxic than the others. They're toxins in different ways. Come in when you breathe them in and get into the blood. And they get into the blood, and the glycocalyx has already been damaged because of the high glucose in the blood, and now it starts damaging the arterial wall. Our skin is another place. So if we're having chemical fabrics next to the skin, if we're washing our clothes in chemicals. My daughter just had her front loader washing machine serviced, and the guy serving us had said, "This machine is so effective you could wash your clothes with no detergent at all." because it's spun and rinsed and spun and rinsed. You know what they did in the old days? They were down by the creek, bashing the clothes against the rocks, scrub, no soap. Interesting. And especially when you hang your clothes on the clothesline, remember that? Clotheslines. On the clothesline, the sun purifies the air. I was staying at a place a couple of years ago now, and I went to wash my clothes and everything was just chemicals, and I thought, oh, well, I'm going to give this a trial. So I just washed all my clothes with just water and hung it on the clothesline. Do you know those clothes smelt fresh? There was no body odour smell at all, just washing with water and putting them in the clothesline. That sun purifies the air and it purifies your clothes. In your foods, there's so many chemicals in the foods. So they're coming from many, many areas, from the food we're eating, getting in from our gastrointestinal tract, on the skin, what we're breathing. They're everywhere, they're everywhere, they're everywhere. We have no say over the neighbour, we have total say over what's in our house. And those chemicals are coming in and they're damaging the cells that line the arterial walls, those little endothelium cells. And just like when you cut your hand, what's happening? What's happening is clot. So the platelets clot, the blood cells clot, they all clot together. They clot together, but the damage continues. So what's happening in the arterial wall? It's called atherosclerosis. So why do they say it's cholesterol? Well, they've taken a biopsy of the plaque and they've tested it and they see fat. They see a cholesterol type fat because every cell in the body is surrounded by a membrane and that membrane is 50% fat. It's actually a theory. Someone came up with this theory, but it's actually not even true. Let's step into the pharmaceutical company. Do you know what their baby is? You know what their star child is? Lipitor. They haven't made millions, they haven't made trillions, they've made billions. Did you hear that? Billions. Billions they have made out of these cholesterol-lowering medication, whether it be Lipitor, whether it be Crestor, or whether it be any of the statin drugs. I've got a book at home, it's called Lipitor, Thief of Memory. And it's written by a Dr. Graveline. Dr. Graveline is a medical doctor and he's also an astronaut. And he went to the doctor for his yearly checkup. As an astronaut, he had to have a yearly checkup. And the doctor said, your cholesterol levels are a little bit high. Do you know what they were? I think they were 220. They're a bit high, so we put him on Lipitor. 6 weeks later, his wife came out into the garden and he didn't know who he was. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know where he was. Stopped the Lipitor. Within 48 hours, he was clear. 10 months later, went for his yearly checkup. Doc said, cholesterol levels are still a bit too high, 220. I want you to go back on Lipitor. And he said, I'm not going to go back on that. I nearly went mad on that. Doctor said, this is very rare. Why did he say that? Because the pharmaceutical companies tell him it's very rare. And he's just supposing they've done the research. I'm sorry to say, in many times, they have not. We're being experimented on. I'm not interested in being experimented on. I don't mind experimenting with the potato poultice because if it doesn't work, it's not going to hurt me. So he went on half dose. Why did he go on half dose? He went on half dose because of fear. He didn't want to die of a heart attack. And we should never make a decision on fear. 6 weeks later, his wife found him out in the garden. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know who he was. He didn't know where he was. They stopped it immediately, and within 48 hours, his mind was clear again. So he put his story up on social media. Within hours, thousands have hit. The same thing happened to me. Side effects of cholesterol-lowering medication: dementia, Alzheimer's, memory loss, muscle wasting, and breast cancer. Interested? And if you are on cholesterol-lowering medication and you decide to stop, and if I was you, I would, as soon as I went home, it would be going in the trash can. Especially when you realise cholesterol doesn't even cause heart disease. Who am I? I'm a nobody. I'm just a journalist. I'm just gathering the information. I'm not a doctor, but Dr. Malcolm Kendrick, all the doctors I've just quoted to you, I've listed in my book, they've done the research. And you can get their books and you can check it out for yourself. If you stop, there will be a side effect. Your memory will return. Your muscles will start to get strong again. How many times is memory loss blamed on age? Poor old age. Gets blamed for too many things. God never designed our brains and our bodies to be deteriorating the way they are. And how many people in aged care facilities have dementia, and it's the cholesterol-lowering medication they're on? Oh, you know what the Bible says? The Bible predicts this. Did you know that? In Revelation chapter 18, talks about Babylon is fallen, that false system. And in 23, verse 23, it says, her merchants were the great men of the earth. Who are the merchants? The salesmen. Who are the merchants of the salesman? Her merchants were the great men of the earth. Who are the great men of the earth? The wealthiest. What's the wealthiest company in the world? The pharmaceutical company. Her merchants were the great men of the earth, and by her sorceries were all nations deceived. That word sorcery comes from the word pharmakia. Do you have pharmacies here? What do pharmacies sell? Drugs, medication. And if you go to the Greek and look at the word pharmakia, it says magic potions. Now, this is Revelation. This is talking about the last days. Her merchants were the great men of the earth, and by their drug medications are deceiving all nations. Have all nations been deceived by this? Yeah. No more. Are you with me here, ladies and gentlemen? No more. No more. No more. Jesus came to set the captives free. Freedom. God's government is a government of freedom. And freedom is based on free choice. As Nelson Mandela said, I'm the captain of my ship. I'm the master of my destiny. I'm the one that chooses what goes in and what does not go into my body. And I'm here to tell you that you can stop that medication immediately with no adverse effects. You can stop the rat poison, the warfarin, immediately with no adverse effects. But please make sure you're drinking adequate water. It's the best blood thinner in the world. And also, please start to implement God's blood thinner. Here it is. Cayenne pepper. This is an organic cayenne pepper. And our singers, don't we love those songs? His company is called Matatui. I said, I've only known Ratatouille. He said, well, I'm Matt. That's Matatouille. And so they have got a little booth up there where they're selling organic, powerful cayenne pepper. Do you know what cayenne pepper does? Thins the blood. Cayenne pepper strengthens the arterial wall, strengthens this wall, and cayenne pepper acts as a vasodilator, opening the blood vessels. There's a book called Jethro Kloss wrote it. It's called Back to Eden. I think he wrote it in the very early 1900s. He devotes half a page to every herb. He devotes 10 pages to cayenne pepper. I think he likes it. And he quotes 2 doctors in his treatise on cayenne pepper. One doctor says it's impossible to abuse cayenne pepper. Do you know what that means? You can have a bucket a day and it will not hurt you. I don't know anyone who has a bucket a day. But it still would not hurt you. Remember Psalm 104, verse 14? God gave herbs for the service of man. They're there to serve you. What does aspirin do? It causes brain bleeds, stomach bleeds, eye bleeds. And if there is bleeding and you take the cayenne pepper, you know what it'll do to the bleeding blood vessels? Seal them. How can it seal bleeding blood vessels and yet act as a vasodilator? Well, I've got lots of questions for God when I'm up there in heaven one day. Maybe none of them will mean anything to me up there, because the Bible says, eye hath not seen, ear hath not heard, neither has entered into the heart of man the things that God has prepared for those that love him. How do you take the cayenne pepper? We can start with 1/3 of a teaspoon in a little water. If that's a bit hard, try capsules. But if someone is coming off something like warfarin, they would need to take a capsule 3 times a day and maybe work up to 3 capsules 3 times a day. Take it with your food. The other doctor in Jethro Kloss's treatise on cayenne pepper says, cayenne pepper will never cause a lesion. That means it will never break the skin and cause a wound. It might feel a bit of tingling, but do you know what that tingling is? Cayenne pepper is a blood stimulant. It stimulates blood flow to the area. In my book, Sustain Me, there's a chapter on poultices where I show that cayenne pepper compresses on the bottom of the feet will reverse neuropathy. You Google neuropathy, that's no feeling in the feet. You know what it says? No known cure. But God has a cure. In the simple herbs. And so, because of the 50% fat membrane around every cell, and because all of those cells are clumped in the clotting, then man tests that plaque and says, we picked up some cholesterol. No, cholesterol does not cause heart disease. Now you know why Dr. Malcolm Kendrick's latest book is called The Clot Thickens. And he quotes doctors from even the late 1800s that believed in the clotting theory of cardiovascular disease. This is not a new theory. But someone has made billions out of this theory. Who is that? The pharmaceutical company. And I don't want even 1 cent of my money going into that. So what I want to show you is how the Sustain Me principles can reverse heart disease. When the sun hits the skin, do you know it acts as a vasodilator? When it warms the skin, it causes a better and more effective flow of blood through the whole body. I don't know if anyone took time today, I certainly did. Oh, that beautiful feeling of the sun being on your skin, thinning your blood and causing that blood to go around. Use of water. I used to do a live blood analysis at Misty Mountain Health Retreat when I was the health director before the Australian government saw fit to ban me. And the blood would often just look like this. The blood moves around very, very fast. In fact, it takes 1 minute for 1 drop of blood to go around your whole body. So when you take a drop of blood, put it on the slide, put it under the microscope, it comes up on the screen, that blood is moving. But in about 1% of cases, sometimes I'd see this. the blood cells are all clumped. I would always presume I've spoiled the slide. It's very easy to spoil a slide. But sometimes 5 blood slides later, it's still looking like this. So then I put my detective hat on and I began to investigate. And my first question is, have you had any water to drink today? And the answer is, no. I'm travelling and I didn't want to have to stop and go to the bathroom. And I say, well, I'm terribly sorry, I can't look at your blood, it's all clumped. And the next day I look at it and it looks like that, because they were so horrified seeing their blood look like that, they started to drink water. In fact, if the blood's clumped like that and the person starts to drink water, and remember, not whole glass at once, no, not 16 ml all at once. If you do that, it's not long before you're going to have to find a bathroom and 16 ml is going to come out. We want to get the water inside the cell, and it'll go inside the cell more efficiently when you're drinking little by little by little by little by little all through the day. How much do we need? We need 8 glasses, and that whole salt. Oh, no, Barbara. No. The doctor says that salt will get my blood pressure up. Have you been told that? Let me give you the truth. I want to take you Matthew chapter 5. I've told you that the best medical book we have is the Bible. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, Jesus said, "Ye are the salt of the earth. If the salt has lost its savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is now good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men." I love the poeticness of the Old English. If the salt has lost its savour, what does that mean? Well, let me show you salt. Seawater. Seawater contains 92 minerals. Now, of those 92 minerals, 30% is sodium and 50% is chloride. Now, because these make up the largest amount, they're the first crystals formed. So you know what man does? He scoops off those first 2 crystals, he bleaches it, puts aluminium in it so it flows freely and has the hide to call it sea salt. But seawater has 92 minerals. Table salt has 2 minerals. And these minerals are so harsh that if you interject that straight into the blood, you'd kill the person. Now, let's say you take a teaspoon of this table salt and a cup of water, that's about the concentration of seawater, fill a fish tank, get fish from the sea, put it into that mixture, all the fish die. And yet people are eating it. When that refined salt goes into the body, it causes an imbalance in and out of the cell, causing pressure to rise up in the cell. So it is true that table salt will get the blood pressure up. But the whole salt. I have a book at home by Dr. Jacques de Langry called Sea Salt's Hidden Power. And he was basically the founder of Celtic salt. You see, Celtic salt is a hand-harvested sea salt. And that Celtic salt, Baja salt, very similar, 82 minerals. And of those 82 minerals, there are 3 magnesiums. There's magnesium sulfate, that's basically Epsom salt. There's magnesium bromide and magnesium chloride. These are the 3 magnesiums that are in this whole salt. And magnesium is a water-hungry molecule. That's why you'll find the Baja salt, the Celtic salt, wet salts. Especially if it's raining, they'll get even wetter, because magnesium is a water-hungry molecule. So when you put that crystal of Celtic salt on your tongue and crunch it a little bit, the mucous membranes in the mouth absorb the magnesium, and then you have a glass or maybe you have half a glass of water and a bit later you have the other glass, that magnesium pulls the water inside the cell. It's the quickest way to hydrate a body. When someone's drinking a lot of water and their feet swell, or they're going to the bathroom all day, that tells me the water's not getting inside the cell. Dr. Jacques de Langry, he said that when he gets a patient with high blood pressure, he puts them on the whole salts, because those whole salts put a mineral balance into the body and can ease high blood pressure. So we need salt. So when the Bible says, yeah, the salt of the earth, if the salt has lost its savour, I'd like to suggest that this table salt has lost its savour. It's lost all the other minerals. And these two minerals are such harsh minerals, they need all the other minerals to balance them out. What does the Bible say? If the salt has lost its savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under men. Ooh, strong words. And when I was in Minneapolis a few years ago, I saw it. They throw salt on the road to melt the ice. And I thought of that verse. Well, that's about the best thing you can do with that salt. And taste the difference. The Celtic and the Baja salts, they bring out the flavour in the food. Whereas the refined salt, they're such harsh salts, they kill the taste buds. I don't know about you, but I've seen some people, they get a meal, they don't even taste it, and they're putting salt all over it. Well, no wonder their taste buds are dying with that refined salt. Yes, it's more expensive than refined salt, but I'll tell you it's worth every cent because you're getting minerals. And tomorrow we're going to look at bones, and I'm going to show you that bones aren't made of calcium. They're made of 12 minerals and 64 trace. Where do we get that in the Celtic salt? Sorry, I'm going ahead of myself. We're going to look at that tomorrow. Sleep, yes, our blood vessels need sleep to heal. And can that be cleaned out? Yes. Isn't God good? What an incredible body we have. Dr. Agatha Thrash and Dr. Calvin Thrash, many years ago they started Uchee Pines, which I think's in Georgia. They're both past now. I think if they were alive they'd be in their hundreds. But Dr. Agatha Thrash, she tells the story, both medical doctors disillusioned with the medical system, disillusioned with drug therapy, and they started to treat naturally. Still running today. Uchee Pines. She used to tell the story when she was alive of a lady who was an alcoholic who came to their retreat. She just had an angiogram and they found that two of her main arteries were 85 and 90% blocked. How are they blocked? With this build-up? No wonder. An alcoholic, that alcohol damages those cigarettes. 7,000 chemicals in cigarettes they're assessing today. More chemicals. The damage continues. With an alcoholic, those glycocalyx is long gone. Can you see what's happening? Whoa. And what I've just drawn for you now is about 85% occlusion or blockage of the main arteries. They didn't want to do surgery on her. You know what they do in surgery? I used to work in operating theatre. I assisted in it one day. They saw open the bones, pull them open like this, and they cut out the offending artery. And they cut out an artery from the back of the leg and sew it into there. But you know, the lining of that artery is not as strong as this one. This one's got to have a lot of force. This one doesn't. How long is that one going to last? How long is that one going to last? And by the way, if you don't change what caused it in the first place, that's going to block up too. So they couldn't do an operation on this lady because she was an alcoholic and she was in her 70s. They thought she won't survive the operation. So her family paid for her to go to Uchee Pines. was a bit hard in the first 24 hours. No caffeine, no cigarettes, no alcohol. But the staff were so lovely. They gave her hot foot baths and massaged her head to ease the headaches. Within 48 hours, she came alive. She started to feel good. I don't think she'd felt so good for a long time. Nourishing food, juices, exercise, water. On the fourth day, she opened the drawer and there was a Bible. And she started to read the stories of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You know, one of my favourite books is The Desire of Ages. I think Tristan talked about it. The author has taken all those stories of Jesus and put them together and also looked at history. Beautiful book. So she read the stories of Jesus and she surrendered her heart to God. And then she wanted to look after her body. She didn't want to go back to her old lifestyle. At the end of the week, she felt so good. She said to Agatha, "Do I have to leave?" So they found her a little room where she could stay, and she helped with the laundry and she walked every day. After 10 months, they didn't see her. They went to her room. She was in bed, but she died in the night. Agatha did a post-mortem on her and found that an embolism in her brain had burst. Her arteries were still, for many years of alcohol had weakened them. But those 10 months, I think, were the best of her life. But when Agatha Thrash did the post-mortem, you know what she saw? Her arteries were clear. Now, it's not often that you can do that. But she had an angiogram, a confirmation she had 85, sometimes 90% occlusion. For 10 months, she'd lived the Sustain Me principles. And part of that was going to bed early and allowing the body to heal, because it's in the early parts of the night that the healing accelerates, especially 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, and a little bit less after midnight. They're the most powerful healing hours. Her arteries were totally clear. Incredible story. What an incredible body we've got. I was explaining this in one of the health programs many years ago, and we had 2 young girls there who were studying nutrition. They said, "We were told that's impossible." Do you know the Bible says in Luke chapter 1, verse 37, with man this would be impossible, but with God nothing is impossible. We do the possible. We do the possible. We implement what we know will work, and God will do the impossible because He is able. Ephesians 3:20 says, "Now unto Him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us." And that power is the power of God. When we invite Him in. So that brings me straight to trust in God, because He is able. There are many methods of healing, but only one that God approves. And that's the true remedies. In page 127 of the Ministry of Healing, where Ellen White lists these laws of health, she says these are the true remedies. I thought that was a bit extreme when I first read it, but after 40 years, it's over 40 years since I first read that, over 23 years I was the health director at our health retreat, I can testify that they are the true remedies. Abstain from anything that could harm that artery. Abstain from that high carbohydrate diet. Abstain from the chemicals. Get them out of your body, because they are all contributing to the damage in that arterial wall. Inhale through the nose, because what the nose does, the nose purifies the air, it warms the air, it humidifies the air, and it balances blood gases. What are the blood gases? One blood gas is oxygen. The other blood gas is carbon dioxide. You can have too much carbon dioxide and you can have not enough carbon dioxide. How could we have not enough carbon dioxide? If you breathe out through your mouth, you lose too much. We should be breathing in and out through our nose. Remember Genesis 2 verse 7, God formed man from the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils. Where did God breathe? Not mouth, nostrils. Breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, he became a living soul. And you can train yourself into nose breathing. Even when you're running up hills, you can nose breathe. You'll get better at it. I have trained myself to only nose breathe. Because what nose breathing does is it balances the gases. The other gas is nitric oxide. Do you remember we talked about nitric oxide, the glycocalyx? It releases nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is very important because nitric oxide is a vasodilator. So when we breathe through our noses, we get a better delivery of blood all through the body. Nitric oxide is not just a vasodilator, it's also antibacterial. It's our natural antimicrobial agents. So nitric oxide is a vasodilator, carbon dioxide is a vasodilator. So you can actually help get your blood pressure down just by nose breathing. And by getting those high sugar, high carb, get that down. And your glycocalyx will revive, and your glycocalyx is going to release nitric oxide. But what also this little glycocalyx does, it stimulates the release of new cells that line the artery, new endothelium cells to help heal and help revive the glycocalyx. We live in a body that's got an inbuilt ability to heal itself, even inside the blood vessels. So nose breathing, just nose breathing, balances blood gases, the oxygen, the carbon dioxide. You see, we've got 25 trillion red blood cells. On the red blood cells, there's 270 million hemoglobin, and your hemoglobin is what carries your oxygen. And when you're breathing in, there's a gaseous transfer. So 4 molecules of carbon dioxide will allow 4 molecules of oxygen to be picked up. But if you're breathing out through your mouth, you might only have 2 molecules of carbon dioxide, so only 2 molecules of oxygen can be picked up. So nose breathing balances blood gases. Now, if I'm going too fast and too technical, I've got some good news. This is all described in my book, Sustain Me, in the chapter, Love Your Heart with All Your Heart. Nutrition. For these blood vessels to revive, for these blood vessels to heal, we need to apply the correct building material. If you want a body that works, if you want a body that repairs, you must supply the correct building materials. Fibre, all plant foods have fibre. And as much as you possibly can, go organic. 1 organic tomato will deliver 9 times the iron of a conventionally grown tomato. And I tell you, taste the difference. You know what you're tasting? Minerals. Eat more plants. And as you'll find out tomorrow when we go on the journey through the gastrointestinal tract, fibre is very important for the proper functioning of our gut. But fibre is not only important for the moving of your colon, But fibre fuels your microorganisms. And tomorrow we'll see how important they are. Protein is vital, the building blocks of our body. Our new cells are all built up by protein. In our brain, the little chemical messengers that flash from cell to cell, they're made up of amino acids, which is a breakdown from the protein that we eat. So my protein I get from lentils, chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannellini beans. When I married my husband Michael, he said, I can eat red lentils, I can't eat brown lentils, otherwise I bloat. He said, I can eat kidney beans, I can't eat chickpeas, I bloat. So I decided to train his gut. So I gave him 1 teaspoon of lentils. That didn't cause bloating. A week later, 2 teaspoons. A week later, 3 teaspoons. So if you find that you bloat with legumes, check, are you soaking them? Are you rinsing them very well? Are you cooking them well? If you still are and they're still bloating, we'll bring it right back. What if a teaspoon causes you to bloat? We'll have 3 lentils. Next week, 4 lentils. Just bring it right back. You're the doctor. Listen. Ever been to a doctor who won't listen to you? Don't be that doctor. If the body speaks, listen. Your body can tell you what no man can tell you. Listen. Fat is an essential nutrient. The best fats are found in the foods that God made, in your nuts, seeds, avocados, coconuts, and the 2 oils that have stood the test of time are olive oil and coconut oil. They've been used extensively before they even heard of heart attacks, cardiovascular disease, and strokes. So when did the heart attacks really begin, or the cardiovascular disease, the strokes? Oh, around the Industrial Revolution. Well, what did they do in the Industrial Revolution? They started to create chemicals, chemical fabrics, chemicals to clean the bathroom. Do you know what's in my laundry cupboard? Sodium bicarbonate and white vinegar. Got that? Guess what was in my great-grandmother's laundry? Sodium bicarbonate and white vinegar. A little bit of eucalyptus oil to make it smell nice. And I also have a biodegradable washing detergent. It's not hard to get them. You'll save a fortune. I just look at what's under the laundry cupboard and under the kitchen cupboards in the Airbnbs. It must cost a fortune, all that stuff. And you know what that's doing? It's poisoning our planet. Polyester, you know there's nothing you can do with it. If you burn it, it poisons the air. If you bury it in the earth, it doesn't break down. It poisons the ground. So we want the good fats. But also in the Industrial Revolution, they created high-heat chemical equipment to extract oil out of hard seeds. And those cheap seed oils get into the blood, and that poor glycocalyx starts to get destroyed, and they can also damage the arterial wall. In fact, it's since the Industrial Revolution, that's when heart disease really came. And all of these measures that medicine has done hasn't lowered heart disease at all. It's still the #1 killer in the world today. Moderation in all the good things. Yes, the fats are important, but don't drink a cup of olive oil a day, but I don't know anyone who does that anyway. We do have common sense. Moderation in all the good things. I never had to ration my children on lettuce, but I did on honey. So moderation in all the good things. Exercise strengthens the heart. Let me tell you about my son Peter. My son Peter, when he was 25, he's just turned 40. Built like this, big. Well, he's never going to be 6 foot, so he can get big on his muscles. When he was 25, he was training for a triathlon. He was running up and down the hills behind Brisbane. He's a tiler. And he was dismantling a broken vanity unit from the 50s, you know, those big chunky ceramic things, and it had a big chip in it. And as he got it out, it slipped, hit his ankle. I think if he hadn't had a bone there, it would have chopped his foot off. And the blood hit the roof. And he called out to my son James, who's about, 6 years older. And James apparently said, "I'm on the phone, mate." Peter said, "I'm in trouble." I tell you that because it was, it was about a full minute before James came in, and James said the blood had just sprayed all over the walls and all over the roof. Why? Because he had a resting heart rate of about 49 beats per minute. Why did he have a resting heart rate of that? Because he's running up and down hills. And the more you use that heart, the stronger it gets. Anyway, they bound it up, took him into emergencies. You know, there is a time. They had to stitch it up. The doctor couldn't believe it, that none of the main ones hadn't gone. And I said, "It's your mother's prayers, Peter." It just hit in a place. Because Peter had to keep working because he and James were in debt because they just built a house together. So every day James would get Peter up and push him to work. Just going, still build. And you know what the mother does? She says, "Good on you, mate. Mothers, don't fuss too much over your sons." It's a hard life out there. You're compassionate, of course you are. But the nurse couldn't believe his pulse. 50 beats per minute. If Peter's resting heart rate had been 70 beats per minute, the blood wouldn't have touched the roof. But his heart was so strong that the blood hit the roof. See, it's like this. If your resting heart rate is about 70 beats per minute, then you're emptying the bathtub with a little cup. Ba-boom, gush, ba-boom, gush, ba-boom, gush. Peter's resting heart rate was 50 beats per minute. So it was ba-boom, gosh, a bucket of water. And you can change your heart rate by exercise. Exercise strengthens the heart. But the exercise that is the most effective at strengthening the heart is a very interesting exercise because it only takes 15 minutes a day. Did everyone get that? So if you say you have no time to exercise, you don't have time not to. This is the best health insurance that you will ever make. So let's have a look at what this high intensity interval training does. In fact, it is proven to be the most effective type of training, so you'll find that most athletes today, they train doing the high intensity interval training, and we're training for something more important than the Olympic Games. We're training for life. Because remember what John 10:10 says? Jesus said, "I have come that they might have life and that they might have life more abundantly." So as the name implies, the high intensity interval training is intervals of high intensity. So what's high intensity? Peter was doing high intensity when he was running up a hill. So when you come to a hill, don't go less, but if you can't run, you walk very fast up the hill and you'll get it. So when I was in Scotland at the beginning of last week, we were in Crieff, and Crieff's right in the middle of Scotland, and it has this hill called the Knock. And we would walk up there every morning, and we would have to have 3 stops because you get such high intensity. We had 3 recoveries going up that hill. because it's so intense. So you don't always have to run. We didn't have to run at all, we just had to walk up that hill at a good pace. And I always count the 30 seconds, otherwise I will stop earlier. Because after 20 seconds, I feel like my body's saying, that'll do. And after 25 seconds, my body's saying, this is getting ridiculous. And after 30 seconds, it's... If you think 30 seconds isn't long, try it. In fact, when you go to that high intensity, your fast switch muscles start releasing, and they are the ones that are responsible for strengthening and healing you. So you don't get to that unless you almost feel like you're dying. That's really pushing yourself. And then 90 seconds recovery. Your indication of fitness is not how hard and fast you can go, but how long you take to recover. The fitter you get, the less time you will take to recover. That's why it's a good idea to note your recovery time, because as you get fitter, it will get less and less. And this is usually done for a cycle of 6. Have you done the maths on that? I'm being generous, that's 15 minutes. That's not long at all. And what I didn't mention in my last lecture on diabetes, but I'll mention it now because I ran out of time, when you're doing this high intensity, your cells are screaming out for more fuel, more oxygen, and so your cell membrane develops extra insulin receptor sites. So if a person has insulin resistance, they can turn that round in 1 week by drastically dropping the carbohydrates, eliminating the sugars and the wheat, and implementing the high-intensity exercise. What an incredible body we live in. But this is the heart-strengthening exercise. No one has ever had a heart attack doing high-intensity interval training. But those long, slow jogs, there are 2 people that keel over on that because they don't give the body recovery time. And recovery time is vital. It's vital for the body to readjust and get back to the high intensity. We had a man attend our program. His name was Henry. He was a retired judge. He was on 6 medications. He was on medication for blood pressure, for blood thinning, for cholesterol, for blood sugars, and also for gout. Can't remember the other one, stomach ulcers. They were his 6 medications. I said, are you interested in stopping your medication? He said, no, I'm very happy on my medication. Thank you very much. Do you know, I respect everyone's choice. Even if I think they're wrong, it's their right. But we put him on a herb called hawthornberry. I was just been in Scotland and England. It's hawthornberry season, time to harvest the hawthorn berries. Hawthorn strengthens the heart. We also put him on cayenne pepper. He stayed on his medication. These work very nicely. They don't go against the medication. And he implemented the laws of health. He went home and he took a whole lot of hawthorn berries. 4 months later, he rings me. He says, Barbara, can I visit you? I want to get more hawthorn berries. I want to give some to my friends. I said, come for lunch, Henry. When I opened the door, I didn't recognise Henry. In 4 months, he'd lost 20 kilos. What's that, 40 pounds? He said, yes, I can do my coat up now. All the puffiness had gone from his face. He looked so good. He was mid-60s. He said, sit down, I have some stories for you. I went to the doctor recently, he took my blood pressure, and he got up and walked out of the room. And Henry said, what's going on? And the doctor said, the machine's broken. He said, your blood pressure is 100 and 80 on 95. Now that's on medication. He said, this machine says your blood pressure's 120 on 75. It must be broken. Henry said, that's my blood pressure now. The doctor took him off all medication because his blood pressure's normal, his blood cholesterol was normal, his blood thinning was normal, his blood sugars were normal. He had no more gout, no more stomach ulcers. And he said, and the doctor said, I don't have to have the total knee replacement anymore. The knees are happy because there's no more weight on them. Incredible. I found this an incredible story because all the man did was implement these true remedies and take the hawthorn berry. He doesn't have to take the hawthorn berry anymore because his blood pressure's normal. The doctor scratched his head. Don't you love it when the doctor scratches their head? I believe it is our responsibility to prove that we can do this. We can do this. He emailed me 6 months later and he said, 38 kilos lost. Wow. What's that, 70 pound loss? He said, I'm just about ready to go back to the bench. God never meant us to be deteriorating so early, so fast. God designed us to have quality of life, even into our latter years. And that's why he says in Romans 12, 1 and 2, he says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. You know why it's reasonable? Because we're the winners. Verse 2 of Romans chapter 12, he says, and be not conformed to this world. Don't be conformed to the way this world eats and drinks and lives. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. And what's the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God? That we have life and we have life more abundantly. Who do you prove it to? You prove it to yourself. And you know, when you prove it to yourself, you now have a testimony. And that testimony is powerful because no one can speak against your testimony. Well, I'm keen to get to bed by 9, and I know you are. So let me close with a word of prayer. Father, thank you so much for this incredible body. Thank you so much for the simple principles that we can implement to have quality of life. And once we conquer the little bits and pieces that happen in our bodies, once we have better quality of life, we are now what you asked us to be, the light of the world. No wonder you said, let your light so shine before men that they, seeing your good works, will glorify the Father which is in heaven. Thank you for this wonderful privilege and opportunity. And we pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Good night. Thank you.